Let's continue with question number 6 from RACE-2 of the Secureum Bootcamp. It says that there are possible security concerns from missing input validations present in the following functions. So at least one of these functions has a security concern from missing some validation of its inputs, so of the parameters passed into the function. The first one says that the create vote function, so the function used to start a new survey, a new vote, there's a problem with the vote ID being duplicated. And if we check the code, you can see here, this is the create vote function. You pass into it a vote ID for the vote that you want to hold. And then we have the possible outcomes of the vote. So what people actually vote for is in here, like yes, no, maybe. And you can also see that it has modifiers only when open and when not paused. So nothing here is actually checking the input variables, the input parameters. And we can also see that it just sets the possible outcomes into the mapping of votes with the vote ID. And the problem here is that after someone has created a vote with some vote ID, another person could come along, use the same vote ID and just overwrite these possible outcomes. And that's certainly a security concern, that someone can just basically switch yes and no around later. So yeah, this is a problem. Generally, I find it a bit strange that it would be allowed that the person creating the vote would be able to determine which vote ID the vote should get. I think this could just be an increment. It starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, and it just keeps incrementing, and then there will never be a clash with any other vote basically. So I think this should just be removed from the function's parameters here. But that aside, we can definitely see that the fact that the vote ID has no validation, no input validation on whether it has already been used is certainly a security concern in this contract. Continuing with B, it says that the cast vote function, there is some missing input validation for the vote ID, for existing vote ID. So if we look at cast vote, so cast vote is obviously the function that people use to then vote yes or no or whatever on the votes that have been created in the create vote function. And for that they just have to pass in which vote ID they are voting for or voting on, and then they specify which of the possible outcomes they want to vote for. There's no function body here. We should just assume that all of the function body here is correct. It has the same modifiers as create vote with the exception of vote exists. What exists was a modifier that basically checks whether the vote ID that was passed in as a parameter actually exists, which makes sense because we wouldn't want to be able to let people vote on things that don't exist. And we are to assume that this check is also correctly implemented, so no problem here. So going back to the question, the fact that cast vote makes sure that vote ID exists is correctly implemented and it is not missing, and therefore B is not a correct option. Next is C. It says the get winning outcome function has a problem with vote ID not being validated for whether the outcome that is returned here is for an existing vote ID basically. And if we look at the code, we see here it says get winning outcome. You specify the vote ID that you want to get the winning outcome for, and indeed there's no modifiers here. It's just a public view function that just returns the outcome for the vote that was specified. And yeah, it doesn't make use of vote exists. But is this a security concern? Arguably not. because this function is a view function, so it is read only. Even if there is no input validation here, nothing bad can happen. So maybe the caller, the callee, the caller gets an empty return value back or something like that, which might not be what they would expect to get or something. But a security concern, I would argue no, not really. So C, also not really a security concern. Then finally we have D, which says that the set membership fee function is missing input validation for its sanity threshold checks. So sanity threshold checks means that there should be some sort of checks whether the parameters being passed into the function even remotely make any sense. Like, are those parameters sane, or do they make sense? Are they reasonable? Are they beyond some thresholds that is reasonable or below them? And these are supposedly missing on fee. Now if you look back at the code, if you remember, there was this join function where people have to, because this is payable, people can send in message value, and this message value that they send in has to be match exactly the membership fee, which is a storage variable, which is defined here with 1000 as a default. And then the actual function that this option is about is the set membership fee function, where this underscore fee parameter is passed in. As you can see, it is only callable by administrators, and it directly updates the membership fee to this new parameter. And now this depends whether this is a security issue or not. It is certainly a security concern, because one of the concerns here is that admins would be able to set a fee that is completely unpayable, that they practically close down the entire DAO, preventing anyone from joining ever again. And that's a security concern, because maybe we don't want admins to be able to do that, but this would implicitly allow them to do this. So maybe there should indeed be some threshold check here that makes sure that the fees can never be some too unreasonable amount, I guess. And maybe these thresholds themselves should be voted for by the members of the DAO, or maybe the membership fee itself should be something that should be voted for by the members, instead of just admins being able to arbitrarily set membership fees. But that's more like my opinion and not really about what we have here. So is the fact that there are no sanity threshold checks for updating the fee via set membership fee, is that a security concern, that nothing is validated here? Arguably yes, it is certainly a concern that should be mentioned. It is not really an issue. It's not anything of high severity, but you can certainly argue that this should be mentioned in a report. So for question 6, A and D are correct.